Hello, this is John from TC Math Academy, and what I have for you here is a nice illustration of how geometry and algebra are combined together in certain problems. Matter of fact, in a lot of geometry problems, you will be using algebra. That's why you have to know algebra, generally speaking, before you really start getting into geometry. But what we have here is a rectangular object, and you can see the dimensions. We have x plus 2 here, 3x right here, and x right here. We're told that the surface area of this rectangular object is 78. Now, of course, if this was units, some sort of specific units of measure like feet, centimeters, this would be units squared, right? Because that's what surface area is. But that's really not so important in this problem. But what the question is, we're trying to solve for x. So this problem is going to take a little bit of work. That's just a little bit of heads up. But beyond that, I don't want to give you any more hints here because I want to give you a full opportunity for you to solve this problem. So if you can figure this out, go ahead and put your answers into the comment section. I'm going to show you the correct answer, and then of course we're going to go ahead and solve this step by step. Also, if you need math help with the course you're taking, test prep, or homeschooling, make sure to check out my math help program at tcmathacademy.com. You can find a link to that in the description below. And if this video helps you out, don't forget to like and subscribe, as that definitely helps me out. Okay, so again, we have the problem here. By the way, feel free to use a calculator and give yourself plenty of room on your paper. Anytime you do math, you should never try to just get like a little yellow sticky and do all your work. Give yourself plenty of room. If you need more paper, get more paper. But let's take a look at the answer. So what is x? Well, x is equal to 13 over 7. Now, if you were able to solve this problem in my book, that's pretty impressive. Matter of fact, I'm going to give you a nice little happy face and A++. I'm actually going to give you more than 100%. I'll give you like 110% and multiple stars. Now, back in my days when I was in middle school and high school, we're talking like the 1970s when disco was on the radio and there was no internet and you had to put a dime into the phone to call someone. Those were what we call the good old days. But back in those days, the most you could get on a test was namely like 100%, and your GPAs would be like a 4.0 GPA. But it's my understanding today you can get like a 9.2 GPA, and maybe you can get like 180% on a test. Anyways, they call that grade inflation, but here's the deal, okay? If you got this right, you have every right to have a nice little happy face because it was a decent amount of work, as you're going to see here in just 1 second. Now, if you didn't get this right, but you felt you were on the right track, what could have happened is maybe some of the algebra may have tripped you up. Whatever the case is, let's start getting into the solution, and I'll give you some suggestions on different aspects of this problem. But the first thing we need to understand is what is the problem, right? Well, we're talking about surface area. So what is surface area? Well, surface area, okay, is the area. So let's just take this top right here. Let's say I said find the area of this top. Matter of fact, let's not use that. Let's use this side right here. Let's just focus in on this right here. If I said find the area, and of course we're dealing with a rectangular object, and let's say this was 3 and this was 5. If I said find the area of this side, well, how would we find that area? Well, the area of a rectangle is length times its width. So here, the area there would just be 3 times 5 or 15 units squared, right? So that's area. Well, surface area is basically the sum total of all the area of that's covering this rectangular object. Basically, think of this as a box, like a shoebox. And how many sides do we have here? Well, we got this side, right? So let's call this like the front. If this is the front, well, we got the back here too, right? So there's 1, 2. Kind of have to use your little 3D imagination to kind of see what's going on here. So we have 1, 2 sides there. And then we have the top, and then of course we'll have a bottom down here, right? So there's 3, 4. And then of course we have these little left and right sides right there. So we have a total of 6 sides. Now what we have to do is find the sum total of these areas, right? So we got 6 sides. And here, you're just going to have to be very careful on what the dimensions are. So for example, this side right here, let's just focus in on this so you can kind of practice. What is the dimensions? What's the length and width of this side? Okay. Well, hopefully you can see that this height is x and its length or width, however you want to think about it, is 3x, right? So the area here would be x times 3x. So effectively what you need to do is just find the area of all these sides and add them up. So you're going to obviously have some sort of algebraic expression because you have all x plus 2, 3x, and x. You do all of that, and you're going to set that equal to 78, and then you're going to solve for x. So I'm basically telling you how to solve the problem. But again, if you didn't get this right or if you're struggling with it, you probably may have gotten tripped up with some of the algebra, okay, because there is, it gets a little messy, but nothing too crazy. So let's go ahead and get into this right now. All right, so let's be a little more specific about this. So let's start with the front. I'll call this the front and back. So here's the front. It's going to be the exact same dimensions, right, as the back. So we'll call this the front and back. So what's its dimensions? Well, it's going to be x plus 2, right? It's its length. And the height here is x, so over here is x as well. So the area here of this front part, and same thing with the back part, is x times x plus 2, or that's the dimensions of it, right? So we'll find the area here in a second, but of course it'd be length times its width. Okay, so now let's move on here to the rest of these. Again, we talked about the side, so here is x times 3x, and we'll kind of just show that right here. So that's the sides, and of course we have two sides, and then we're left with the top and bottom. So right here, the top and bottom is what? Well, what's this dimension here? Well, if this is x plus 2, this is also x plus 2. And what about this side right there? Well, that'll be 3x. Okay, so the top right here, which is the same as the bottom, is 3x by x plus 2. So again, if you want to find the area here, you just multiply this times this. Okay, so hopefully, you kind of conceptually see what's going on here. Now it's just a matter of just again, kind of crunching the numbers, the variables, and let's go ahead and start doing that right now. All right, so again, the surface area is the sum total of all these sides of this rectangular object, which again, we have a top, we have a bottom, okay, which are the same dimension. We have a front and a back, and we have two sides, which are have the same dimension. So let's just kind of organize our thoughts here and calculate this out. All right, so the top and bottom would be this. Okay, so 3x times x plus 2. Let's kind of go back up to our little figure here. So the top here is 3x times x plus 2. That's the area, right? Again, we're calculating the surface area, but this would just be, for example, like the top. So we're going to have to multiply this thing by 2 to get the total surface area for the top and bottom, right? So that's just the easiest way. So here is the top and bottom. Again, this is how we find the area. And then here the front and back was x times x plus 2. Again, we can kind of reference our little drawing right here, or x times x plus 2. So that's the area of that, but we need to multiply by 2, again, because we have two of these. That represents the front and back. And then lastly, we had our sides, which is x times 3x, but we have two sides. So now this is kind of our setup. And so we kind of double check this, and we're like, all right, this is, makes sense to me. And before you get too deep into a problem, always double check that you have your, expressions correct, matches the figure, and everything seems good. So at this point, let's just start cleaning up these algebraic expressions. And of course, we're going to equate this to the known surface area, which is 78. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. So this is basically what it looks like. Of course, I'm kind of running out of room from left to right. But we have 2 times 3x times x plus 2 plus 2 times x plus 2 plus 2 times x times 3x. All of that is going to be equal to 78. So let's start working on this right now. Okay, so let's start right here. So 3x times x is going to be 3x squared. All right, so 3x times 2 is 6x. Okay, I'm going to multiply that by 2, but I'm just kind of controlling my expression right now working on the inside groups first, okay, these inside parentheses. So this would be 2x times x is x squared, and then x times 2 is 2x squared, and then we'll multiply that by 2, as you can see right here. And then we have x times 3x, which is 3x squared, and we'll multiply that by 2. So again, we're just, taking one step at a time. If you try to take too many steps, what's going to end up happening is you might be thinking that you're, taking a shortcut, but what you're doing is massively increasing the chances that you're going to make an error. Okay, so if you want to do things right, you always want to do things right the first time, which means you have to go at a nice controlled pace so you can kind of audit yourself, grade yourself as you go. Even then, it's still always possible to make a mistake, but double check as you go because you can catch errors along the way. All right, so we have all these respective sides. So let's go and distribute these twos into these various expressions. So 2 times 3x squared gives us 6x squared. 2 times 6x gives us 12x. And then 2 times x squared, 2x squared, 2 times 2x gives us 4x. Got to be very careful here. And then 2 times 3x squared gives us 6x squared. And that's all equal to 78. But again, we have to continue on with this algebra. And the next step here is to combine like terms. So let's go ahead and do that right now. So here's an x squared, here's an x squared, and here's an x squared. So 2 and 6 gives us a total of 14x squared. Then we have 12x and 4x gives us 16x squared. That's equal to 78. Now at this point, what you can do is hopefully, notice that you're dealing right now with a quadratic equation. All right, so this is kind of the phase 2 of this problem, okay? And at this point, you have to start saying to yourself, okay, I got a quadratic equation. How do I solve a quadratic equation? Or first of all, what do you know about a quadratic equation? Well, the first thing is you're going to have two solutions, always have two solutions, but there's various approaches that you can take. You could possibly take the square root of both sides. You could possibly factor, and if you don't want to do that, you can always use the quadratic formula. But before you even start doing any of that, you should look for opportunities to simplify your equation. So if we notice here, we can factor out a 2 out of all of these expressions. So in other words, the 2 is the greatest common factor. So I can write the left-hand side as 2 times 7x squared plus 8x equal to 78. But 78 is divisible by 2. So effectively, I can divide both sides of the equation by 2, and I end up with this lovely equation right here, 7x squared plus 8x is equal to 39, okay? So you always want to work with the simplest version of this equation. So in other words, this equation and this equation are equivalent, but these numbers here are lower and easier to work with, especially if I feel like I need to use the quadratic formula, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and continue on our little adventure here. So now we're got 7x squared plus 8x equals 39. So, there's nothing we can do here that's kind of obvious other than put this equation in standard form. In other words, highest to lowest power. So we're going to scoot that 39 over to the left-hand side. So now we have a quadratic equation in standard form. When I say standard form, I mean this, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. This is a quadratic equation in standard form. Now at this point here, you could attempt to factor this quadratic trinomial, but we're dealing with pretty large numbers. So even though it might be factorable, okay, and I'll kind of reserve whether it is or is not, some of you might be saying, you know what, it's in standard form, i.e. ax squared plus bx plus c. So instead of trying to factor this, because it might be a little bit challenging, because you may not be able to factor it, you might decide just to go right into the quadratic formula because it's already set up. It's already written in standard form, and that's what I am going to do here. Okay, so here is our quadratic equation, 7x squared plus 8x minus 39 is equal to 0. The coefficients is our a, b, and c. Okay, so you can see here, a will be equal to 7, b is equal to 8, and c is negative 39. And now what we have to do is plug all this lovely information into the world famous quadratic formula. So this is one formula that you should know by heart, especially if you are taking algebra. So x is equal to minus b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I even remember this formula when I learned it first, probably way back in 1983. Can you believe that stuff? I don't even think they had video. Well, maybe they did have MTV. I don't remember. That's a long time ago, right? So anyways, there are certain formulas that you want to commit to long-term memory, and this is one of them. Okay, so we have our A, B, and C values. What we want to do is very carefully replace these respective variables for these values and then simplify the remaining expression to solve the quadratic equation. All right, so let's go and do that right now. Okay, so here I have x is equal to minus 8. 8 again is our b value, and you always want to be double checking as you plug this stuff in. So plus or minus square root of 8 squared. Notice I'm using parentheses, minus 4ac, which is going to be 7 times negative 39, right? Because we have our a value and our c value right there, all over 2a, which would be all over 2 times 7. Now, before you even continue to proceed, I'm telling you right now that a lot of students, they understand what the quadratic formula is, but they'll plug in their numbers into the quadratic formula, and then they'll make like a little error here. They'll plug in the wrong number because there's a lot of things kind of moving parts here. So don't do anything double, triple checked. Okay, I got everything plugged in correctly, and then proceed from there. All right, so let's go ahead and start simplifying this. So we'll start with this negative 8. A negative of an 8 is just negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared, which of course is what? That's going to be 64. Now this is one of the most classic places where students make an error in the quadratic formula. Okay, this is going to be minus 4 times 7 times negative 39. A good way to handle this part of the quadratic formula is to turn this negative, this b squared minus 4ac, turn this into a plus and then put that negative on that 4. Okay, that's just a good reminder that this is a negative number times a positive number times a negative number. What's a negative times a positive times a negative? This whole thing is going to be positive. So instead of just trying to think of the signs, just tell yourself, oh, this is negative times positive. That's going to be a negative, negative times negative, positive. So just take 4 times 7 times 39, and feel free to use your calculator. You're going to come up with 1092, and then 2 times 7. That is pretty easy to figure out. That, of course, will be 14. All right, so here is where we're at. So now we need to continue to clean up underneath the square root. So 64 plus 1092. Did I say 1092? I don't know if I did or not. But anyways, there it is, 1092. So 64 plus 1092 gives us 1156. So now we're down to here, and at this point, you're saying to yourself, I sure hope that I can take the square root of this and it comes out to be a nice, lovely kind of whole number value, right? Like a perfect square. And in this case, in fact, you can. So when you take the square root of 1156, you get, let's go down here, 34. All right, so we love that when it happens. So now we're down to this expression. We have negative 8 plus or minus 34 over 14. Now, I said that there's two solutions in a quadratic equation. How do we get those two solutions? Well, what we're going to do is the following. So the one solution is going to be negative 8 plus 34, okay, over 14, okay? So that'll be one solution. The other is going to be negative 8 minus 34 over 14, just like I did right here. So let's go ahead and clean this up. So negative 8 plus 34 over 14. Here, this gives us 26 over 14, and we can reduce that to 13 over 7, which of course is our answer. Now, when we do this work over here, we end up with this fraction, negative 42 over 14, but we can kind of disregard this. Now, why could I disregard this solution? Now, this is a good solution for the quadratic equation, but it's not the solution in our answer. And the reason why, this is a negative value, right? We're talking about the surface area of this rectangular object. So we're not going to have like -3 as like, the height of the object. So we're going to go with the positive value, which of course is this value right here, 13/7. Okay, so as I indicated in the beginning of this video, this was going to require, a decent amount of work. But it's just like taking a long road trip, right? Even though you might have to spend a few hours, maybe more than that, on the road, you can make it. Right? Is the driving difficult? No, you might get a little tired, but as long as you remain focused, you'll reach your destination. And doing a problem like this is basically the same thing. Now, if you need help with any of kind of what's going on here, whether it's the quadratic equation stuff or the geometry stuff, I'm going to kind of direct you towards one or two of my courses. If you're struggling with the algebra part of this, I would direct you towards my Algebra 1 course. I have multiple videos on my YouTube channel as well that can help you out. So my Algebra 1 course, if it's the geometry portion of it, of course, you can check out my full geometry course. So either one of those courses can help you out depending on what you need help with. Okay, so with that being said, I definitely wish you all the best in your mathematics adventures. Thank you for your time and have a great day.